Welcome to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. My name is Tony D'Agostino. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. In this series of exclusive podcasts, we will meet with tenured and growing leaders in the childcare field, typically operating medium to very large childcare operations from tens of schools to thousands of schools. Our incentive is to learn what has been the path and traits that make outstanding leaders. Join us to glean the sage wisdom from these experienced individuals. Now, let's get started with ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders.
When you think about training, it really should not be a burden. It should not be something that your administrative staff has to think about who they are assigning, when a person has completed this, have they completed this, did they meet their continuing education units, what happens if licensing walks in, and blah, blah, blah. Well, ECE University really helps solve a lot of those issues because you are able to assign courses, multiple courses, entire learning paths, all to an individual according to what their specific need is. So prescriptive learning. It allows them to take one course, and after that course is done, it sets them on the journey for the next course and so forth and so on. You can create different paths depending on the person's job role, whether it be a assistant teacher, an administrator, it doesn't matter. You can put that together yourself with the different courses we have there. You can blend the courses of what we offer you with 200 plus hours of courseware, as well as any courses you want to put on there and have a full learning path. ECE University.
Welcome to ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. I am your host, Tony D'Agostino, the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. Over the last 10 years, we have been bringing solutions and support to our early care and education industry to focus on our why. That is to help develop the next generation of amazing children. On today's show, we have Jeff Lamb, who serves as the CEO of Lionheart Children's Academy, a role he stepped into in February of 2024 after 4 years on the Lionheart's board of directors. He's a leader with people-first philosophy. Jeff is passionate about cultivating a Christ-centered environment with children and teams flourish. Lionheart Children's Academy, as you will learn in here, does a unique approach that they come to Christian schools throughout a number of different states and sees if they have additional space that is meaningful for the community as well as the parish for children to come into a childcare program. His deep beliefs that healthy organizations begin with healthy people, and he has shaped his leadership across multiple industries. Before joining Lionheart, Jeff served as key executive role as an EVP of corporate services as well as the chief people officer over at Southwest Airlines. We get into a couple stories about that, and it was an amazing journey. President and Chief Operating Officer at Vari prior, Jeff was instrumental in streamlining operations, shaping the strategic plan, and leading the company's foray into commercial real estate. He has also worked for the lauded former quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, Roger Staubach, as an executive as well as a senior leader at Bello. Throughout his career, Jeff has championed servant leadership, organizational culture, and the power of purpose-driven teams. He is a native of Texas. Jeff is also involved in supporting local communities through his church. He currently serves on multiple boards of directors, including Lionheart's Children's Academy, the Hope Center, DBU College and Business Advisory, but previously also served at the Dallas Children's Hospital and on the national board for Make-A-Wish, which is dear to my heart as I was a board member myself with Make-A-Wish in Western New York. He and his wife of more than 40 years, Kim, live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and are proud parents of 3 married daughters and grandparents to 5 grandchildren. Let's give Jeff a warm welcome today, and here we go. Hey, Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited to have you here. You know, it's been a little bit for us to get this set up, and now that you're here, we're coming into summertime. I think it's a good time, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with you.
I am as well.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm going to kick it off, and one of the things I do tend to kick off is I like to ask a question that tends to look back to you when you were young? And this is a question that I like to ask a number of people just to get the conversation started, is when you were young, did you happen to see in yourself any elements that you eventually would become a leader in, whether it be within social organizations or corporate organizations, or basically becoming a leader that of others that people would look to follow? Did you ever see that in yourself when you were young?
And not at first, Tony. I think the leadership word was a surprise the first couple of times I heard it. I can still remember where I was standing on the bleachers out kind of off the seventh grade football field practice, and the coach was talking to us, and he said, Washburn, Allen, Richmond, Lamb, you guys are our leaders. You need to really step it up or something. And I was like, I mean, he said, they're faster, bigger, smarter. Why is he lumping me in with them? And that was really the first time for me that the leadership seed was planted, that I need to consider thinking of myself as one of the leaders and influence. And then from that point forward, I began to have it confirmed. But I didn't necessarily see myself that way until probably high school, and got elected captain of the team, and my friends would ask me to kind of be the peer coach for the baseball team and those kind of things. And so I began to see it as kind of that there were some natural leadership qualities. I think it was also the fact that maybe I'm a middle child and I'm a little bit of a peacemaker. So when they're looking for somebody kind of neutral or Switzerland to kind of help lead, that may have been a part of it as well.
Interesting. What do you think? Obviously you just led to one of those attributions about possibly being the middle child, but when you reflect on it, you say some of them were bigger, faster, quicker. Why do you think you were tapped on the shoulder?
It's I don't know. I mean, I have to go back and ask Coach Elms at the time, but I had a teacher kind of the same thing. When the class maybe was misbehaving, even as early as elementary school, she kind of would pull me aside and say, you're kind of the leader. You're the one that if you'll calm down, if you'll be good, And again, I don't know what they saw necessarily. It may be some form of influence, but yeah, they saw it first. I didn't see it. I didn't necessarily aspire to it. But then in high school became the captain and the quarterback of the football team, and that's really your first. I mean, you are the leader on the field. The people are looking to you to lead.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of my first role of a leader, that where I really began to recognize that I needed to step up and be a leader amongst others.
Do you feel like you put some weight on your shoulders, or were you pretty good with it at the time of like, hey, I got this? Or did you feel like it was a bit of a burden?
No, I don't recall any burden at all. It was, again, pretty humbling, because it was in the academic and athletic world, and I did not excel in normative standards in either one of those areas. And so it was very humbling. So it was a position of honor to do that. But I think Tony, if it's an attribute or a trait, one thing that I learned early on was work ethic. My dad took me before I could get a job as a dishwasher to shine shoes in his barber shop, and I went with him every day all summer long, 8 to 5, and shine shoes for 50 cents a shine. Wow. And that work ethic, I think I've heard it said this way, that hard work doesn't guarantee success, but I've never met a successful person that didn't work hard.
Right.
And I've seen that, and looking back on it now, I've seen that over my 44 plus year career in corporate America, if you will, that you don't have to be the smartest or the most gifted athletically or talented. You can outwork most of the other competition, if you will. And so I would say work ethic was maybe one thing that maybe set me apart a little bit. That try a little harder at practice. Come a little early, stay late, those kind of things. I think that was maybe the attribute or the characteristic that distinguished that.
And I usually bring this up a little later in the conversation, but for some reason, I don't know, I'm vibing with it now a little bit is, how about values and ethics? Do you feel like when you were young that your values that you held or ethics, were they pretty solid at that time, or were they evolving with you as you were growing up at that part of your life? And do you feel that had any kind of influence on you becoming a leader?
Tremendous influence, critically important. A whole motivation in large part for early childhood education and Lionheart is that, different reports, but I think most people agree that a person's worldview, their character, their personality, and their view of the world is established as early as 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And we would say the biblical values, and so the learning right from wrong, respecting your elders, don't steal, don't lie, that those kind of values are instilled really, really early. They were in me. I think they were in most people at that era growing up in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That's what's so important, I think, for values-based, faith-based education to take place, because it really, again, I'm not that experienced. I'm new to this world, but I had a good friend that was an elementary school principal for 40 years. And he said that, Jeff, when I get them, when they're 4 or 5, kind of who they are is who they leave here with.
Yeah.
If they're kind, loving children at 4, they go to the 5th grade that way. If they're kind of cantankerous or mean or not obedient, they kind of leave that way.
Sure.
And someone that has prided themselves in developing people and leadership development, to think that so much of what we have to work with is really ingrained in us very, very early.
Yeah.
And that you can, there's certain things you can develop. I can probably coach you to be a better leader at delegation, or time management or strategic vision casting. But to care for people, to think of others more than yourself. I mean, that starts young.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that leads me to the other thing that you were starting to say about your father bringing you to his barbershop where you're shining shoes. Obviously, he was one of your influences. Who was your other young influences? Maybe he was even more from different reasons, or there's other members of your family or outside of your family that were influences on you when you were young. Who do you look back to and say, yeah, that was a person who really helped me think through where I wanted to go?
I tell you, I have reflected on that quite a bit, and I don't know who to credit exactly with this phrase, but maybe it was Pat Lencioni. But the mosaic of mentors really resonated with me because I've had so many different people that were influenced that I feel like I've picked up kind of bits and pieces from a lot of different mentors. Early on, teachers and coaches, again, why education is so important. Teachers and coaches, huge influence. You're in school, you're in church, so your pastors, your Bible study teachers. I think there's a tremendous amount of influence there, and as you mentioned, family. I had was very close to my father's mother, my grandmother.
Oh.
His dad died when he was very young, so here's kind of the original single working woman in the 1930s post-depression, trying to raise a small son. And, I work ethic from her, but I think just her humility and servant's heart were very influential on me. But I would tell you that this is it kind of gets off on a lot of what you like to talk about in terms of leadership and leadership development. But you can't mentor, you can't coach somebody if you don't watch them play. It's just, I mean, you can advise me. I could call you up and say, Tony, hey, I had this meeting, didn't go very well. What do you think? Right. But imagine a basketball coach not watching the game and then just trying to guide the players so what did you do? And you did this. And so my most influential folks were coaches that watched me play.
Sure.
Most of my supervisors, if you will, people that I worked for that I turned work into, were very key. And I would tell you that early on, while you're forming your own kind of leadership style and work effort, kind of how you organize your day and your work, those early supervisors are very, very influential. And I've interviewed people for 40 years. And one of my favorite questions is, who was your early leader or supervisor that you see yourself today doing a lot of the same things they did? That shadow of the leader. And for me, it was the president of Mesa Petroleum, Paul Kane, that I worked for in kind of my mid to late 20s. I see a lot of what I do that Paul did, good and bad, somewhat, but he was probably the most influential, mentor, leader that I had early in my career that really shaped what kind of leader I would become.
What were the kind of things that he was doing that you started to emulate, or at least wanted to emulate?
Yeah, well, some of it is, I'm not sure a conscious decision to emulate or a desire to want to emulate as much as it is they're training you, and so you begin to shadow what they do. So if they make a list and go through an agenda, then you make a list and go through an agenda in a meeting. If they stay late, you stay late. If they treat people kindly and with respect, then you begin to see that. He worked too many hours. He was very organized, but I think the thing that I admired about Paul and what he taught me, and I ended up most of my career in roles like Paul's, he was the number 2 guy. He was second in command, very comfortable outside of the limelight, very comfortable, kind of sharing the CEO was T. Boone Pickens, so Mesa Petroleum, T. Boone Pickens in the 80s. High merger and acquisition activity. And Paul would speak the truth, would be a truth teller to Boone. And Boone was the frontman, and Paul was in the shadows, making everything happen, operationally running things well. And if I look back, worked for him, and then I went to work for, at kind of a C-level position, a lot of time coaching, counseling the CEO at, Roger Staubach or Gary Kelly at Southwest Airlines, or Jason McCann, the owner of Aerie. I had a role similar to what I learned as a 20-year-old for most of my career.
Well, I definitely want to get into your time at Southwest too, coming up here. But I wanted to ask you before that, I'm going to ask you sort of the inverse. Did you work for supervisors or whatever, and you're like, that's not who I ever want to be? And there were points and times where you were like, this person could really take me off the path of where I'd like to go. And if so, what did you do about it?
Yeah, well, I think that's everybody, right? I mean, if you're working for very long periods of time, you can't always, unless you own the company, you can't always pick your bosses, right? No. And so you get good ones, you get great ones, you get.
And I'm not looking for names, by the way. I'm just looking for what were those? Because I know sometimes people, I think, get into ruts sometimes because they don't even realize that they might be maybe following someone as a leader that may not be helping them out the best for what their future is. I think that's sort of where I'm getting is if you were able to identify any of that when you were younger.
Yeah. I don't know that I characterized it as, oh, I like this, I don't like that. I think what we learn over time, and there's a body of work called Career Anchors that calls them those job satisfiers or anchors. So it's like a boat anchor. You like the water, So if you're someone that really likes autonomy, and
Right.
and you work for a leader that is a micromanager, like a boat anchor, you'll come back to work that has autonomy, right? And you figure those things out over time. I mean, I love to try to encourage people to figure it out earlier, so they don't spend 10 years in a career they don't really know exactly why they don't like the job. And but it's things like autonomy or job challenge or diversity of work or purpose in the work. Those are the things that drive our job satisfaction, and high job satisfaction is going to create great performance.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, connected, and the reverse of that's true. So low satisfaction, even if you've got a great work ethic, whatever, you're not going to have great performance. You might fight through it if you like the organization or you like some of the people you work with.
Right.
But I just tell you, I think there's, leaders that, well, I'll give you one example. I was sitting down getting some feedback from a leader of mine, and he said, good year, whatever, a lot of good. It's always kind of like a lot of positive, but then here's one thing I want to talk to you about. He said, you got elbowed out for credit on that board presentation by so and so. And he said, yeah, you did all the work on it. It was a stock incentive plan or something. He said, you did all the work and then you let her get all the credit. And I said, well, excuse me, I pulled out our core values, one of which was teamwork. And I'm like, well, she and I are on a team. I mean, she didn't, we're happy to support each other, whoever gets the credit. And it's like, if a leader is teaching you to elbow out a peer to make sure that you get credit for something, that was a short-lived relationship with him.
Yeah, it's a little suspect, right? Because okay, so I remember I clearly had a person that I was very impressed with once that I was working for when I was with MCI Communication way back in the day. And I do remember I was sort of like I was at least 15 years younger than this guy who I was like sort of in awe at because he really could command a room. But then he did some things on the back end of stuff. He was like, we're all of a sudden we're going to his country club for dinners. And he's like, hey, I'd like you to write down a few names on this report. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a minute. This seems, he's like, no, this is how we work things in corporate. And my vibe was just like, I've got to find an escape plan because I was like, this doesn't feel where it should be going, even though I didn't know any better back then. I was very young in my corporate career. So it is things like that where it's like it doesn't vibe with your own values, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is something that you learn back when you're young, like you say, all the way up to the age of 5, where you start to really get that impression, and that becomes your guiding rod for where you go.
Yeah, I like to call them filters. You kind of filter your jobs through those things that are important to you.
Yeah.
I kind of naively discovered that CEOs tend to get their information filtered up when it comes up from the people that report to them.
Right.
And I was in my 20s and Boone Pickens was going to run for governor of the state of Texas, and everybody was saying, "Go for it, Boone, go for it. You can do it. You'll win. You'll be great." And I was like, I don't think you can win. And he calls me to his office to have the conversation about it, and again, I'm not nervous. I'm just, I'm the guy that is, the supervisor of the mailroom, and here's the CEO, and he's quizzing me about it, and just really complimentary afterwards that, an hour conversation that I would challenge the process with him.
Yeah.
And, he had more information than I did. I was like some political science college student that thought I knew everything. But the long and short of it is you begin to reflect and say, do I want to work for an organization that doesn't want my honest opinion, if
Right.
if communicated respectfully? Right?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. And so if I ever got into a situation where a leader or an organization said, don't really care what you think. I don't want, if I want your opinion, I'll ask for it or I give it to you, whatever the saying is. That wouldn't be for me, right? And so you begin to, I think, to develop those things that are your pass fail for whether or not they align with your values and with your filters.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, I, I I look at your career as you start to ascend from leadership capabilities and looking at your background, you had a number of leadership roles in several corporate jobs outside of childcare, which is very much where I came from myself personally, working for companies like Bellow or Staubach. And I would assume that's associated with Roger Staubach to a degree if you're from Dallas.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, but we share the fact too that we were both, I was a board member on Make-A-Wish for, gosh, 10 years at least. So it's good to see that on your background. But you also came up through Southwest Airlines that you brought up before, in addition to several other roles. The reason I'm interested in that is because your title was Chief People Officer there as one of your last titles. And that obviously is a big role with a company that was really known for culture. And so you look at the convergence of a company that is known for culture and its people, and you're playing the CPO role. That's, I don't know. Do you feel pretty good about that one?
Well, I don't think I messed it up too much. That's Tony, it's interesting because I get asked about being the chief people officer at Southwest Airlines a lot. It's probably the most I don't know if what the right term is, well known or recognizable or glamorous kind of title. It's the reality of it is that the chief as the chief people officer, I had human resources responsibilities, Southwest University, culture services, all that, but I also had 7 other larger departments. Is kind of a group, leader, an EVP, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I had really talented functional leaders, Julie Weber over the people department, Elizabeth Bryan over learning and development, Cheryl Huey over culture and services, and Ellen Torbert over diversity. And they really were the work, the creativity, the driving force behind the people related things during my tenure at Southwest. And I could see Colleen Barrett's fingerprints, the kind of one of the original employees that rose to the ranks of the president, working for Herb Kelleher. You could clearly see Ann Rhodes. Ann was the head of HR for Southwest early. I think she went on to JetBlue, and she's got a very successful consulting business. And, I could see Ann's fingerprints on a lot of the different things that made Southwest such a great place to work. But Elizabeth Bryant, Julie Weber, that group, they really, Cheryl Huey took it to new heights. We began to take some of my background, where I could get in. I like to operationalize and get data. And we did our first employee engagement survey in, I think, probably 2008 or 2009 in the history of the organization. And had just, I'll tell you a little bit story about this. So I'm sitting around the table and Colleen Barrett's up there, and she's talking about some issue. And she said, we've had a rash of these things that, we're losing our culture. We're losing our culture. And I'm like, well, how many employees have said that to you? And she said, oh, 5 or 6. I'm like, out of 40,000, that's not a rash, Colleen. But I had no data. She
Right.
had a good pulse of the organization. And I think our first employee survey, we had scores that were unbelievable, like in the high 80s on employee engagement.
Wow.
where you would have been happy at 60 or 70. And literally that team of Elizabeth and Cheryl and Julie, and then we got cross-functional teams from other departments, set a goal to increase the employee engagement a couple of points every year. So for several years, it grew. It was up in the 90s, the low 90s. I think at the time I left, and so yeah, it's evolved, but it's evolved because Colleen insisted that you don't define the culture at Southwest. By defining it, you limit it. So, if you were to join the organization, you would add to the richness of the diversity of our cultural DNA. We had core values to make sure that we hired people that, put others first, were, we said fun-loving attitude, but a joy to work with, and,
Right.
had that work ethic of a warrior spirit. So we hired to our core values, and we trained and developed and rewarded and celebrated. But we let the culture get enhanced with everybody that came in and that was able to be themselves and bring kind of their whole self to work, as people like to say.
Well, and some of the things you talk about, you're obviously naming some names who made a big imprint at Southwest, but I'm confident you probably did too. What did you find or learn through your journey, not just with Southwest, but up to that point in your career, when you looked at hiring and recruiting and you really were honing in, bringing in the right people for the role? Do you have a little bit of a formula you've developed for yourself, whether or not that person has to have a very specific technical skill? Outside of that, the kind of people that you wanted to work with, or you felt that the company would want to work with, have you developed a bit of a recipe over time of how you go about that and look at people?
I don't know. I was definitely art and science. So you mentioned the technical skills. So that's the science piece you can kind of
Sure.
get, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how to use this, or have you done that? The art piece is really difficult, and there's a lot of assessments that get sold, and I think some organizations feel like they're useful, but I would tell you that you pick a professional sports organization. So we're talking about Roger Staubach, the Dallas Cowboys in the 70s and 80s. The Cowboys spend more. I bet you spend more money as a percent of revenue than any other organization on evaluating talent, right? Scouting departments, combines, coaching staffs, player personnel. When they do the Wonderlic test, they do all these different things, and they draft 10 players and get 7 of them wrong. Yeah. And so there is not a formula. The art piece of it are the intangibles. Now, I think that it is an absolute must is really truly understanding your organization's core values. And if you look up Webster's definition of core, it means the essence or innermost of who you are. And if you have more than 3, and they're aspirational, like they're excellence and diversity, or kind of what everybody should have, like honesty or integrity or character. Those aren't core. That's not the essence. The essence of who it is. So at Lionheart, our 3 core values are a heart to serve, tenacity, and intentional relationships. And if you don't have tenacity and you're in childcare, you're not going to fit, right? That's if you're here for some other reason than a heart to serve children, for $15 an hour or whatever, it's not going to work, right? And if you're not intentional about building a relationship with the child, if our teachers love the children and the children love the teachers, and the teachers build a relationship with the parents are going to be happy, right?
Yeah.
My kid loves the teacher loves my kid. If I have a problem, can I elevate it to the director, and if they handle it well, then I'm good. So those are the 3 core values. And so to me, it's like you got to find your core, the essence of who you are, and hire to that.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then I think you're 90% of the way there. But I've listened to you enough to know, from a leadership perspective, how do you hire servant leaders. How do you hire for servant leadership? And Tony, the way the formula, I guess, it's not really a formula, but just a habit that I started years ago, was asking leaders about their prior, direct reports. So
Right.
tell me a time when you had multiple direct reports. They tell me. So what were the different groups? Again, standard interview questions. So they're happy to tell me, oh, I had 5 departments, and this department, that department. That's well, great. And so, who ran each department for you? Who reported to you? And they're like, you want their names? I'm like, oh, just give me their first name.
Yeah.
No. So they kind of go through, and it's amazing how many people can't even remember the names of the people that reported to them. But cut them some slack. Number of reports come and go and change. You're at MCI, and so
Yeah.
And so then they'll pick out and they'll say, okay, Ted ran this and Maria ran. I'm like, okay, great. Well, tell me about Maria. What is the most important thing in Maria's life? And I can almost always tell by the answer whether that person really knew them and cared about them.
Right.
Because it's an old was an old Teddy Roosevelt quote that people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
So if a leader doesn't, care about them, they're not going to be able to lead them well. And if you care about somebody, you're going to know the most important thing. And if they say, "Oh, soccer," they're soccer every weekend, and really, soccer is the most important thing in their life. But occasionally I'll get a leader and they're like, you know what, Maria, she has a nephew whose family has never graduated college, and a lot of them are in trouble with the law, and she is investing in her nephew to make sure that he graduates and he stays out of trouble. He's the most important thing in her life. Then
Yeah. And I think it's pretty impressive, because I do reflect back on my engagements and things of that nature. And it does oftentimes come back about, honestly, like you said, caring or understanding or having a willingness to learn about people, where quite oftentimes you watch other people just sort of blaze through relationships. You mentioned something about tenacity, and it was funny because I was going to ask you about tenacity right before you said it. So it's a little bit serendipitous, but is there a way that you have of evaluating tenacity? Because I agree with you fully that, I'll give you an example. We had a new school that we acquired. We brought over someone who we've had some good experience with, who was a very well thought of teacher. She was very diligent and dutiful, and she was very caring. And we promoted her up to and brought her over to this other school that was brand new. And unfortunately, the rough got going there a little while for her. We had a CPS issue that was unexpected and some things. And then she was like, I quit. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And we didn't see this. We were literally blindsided. We thought that she had a level of tenacity, and we made the wrong call on this young lady, but, it was not the right time in her life. And there was other things, circumstances going on. So how do you help evaluate tenacity? Because that is a challenging thing, especially in an interviewing process, right? To sort of get a sense of what the future looks like, the crystal ball.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of it's going to be from the work history, and
Right.
just the difference between we're full-time childcare and part-time, Mother's Day out programs and that kind of thing. You're going to get a the predictor of the future to see past performance is obviously one key way to do it. You can, if they don't have that, you can ask questions that would give you an understanding of difficult, tell me about a difficult assignment you had or a role that you really had to push through to get to complete to the end. What was your part in that? What was the outcome? Who did you work with? So there are questions that you can try to replicate if they can't describe a job that is as tenacious as being a preschool teacher.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. But it's interesting because I think there's a difference when you are in a classroom with those teachers who can manage the toddler room, but sometimes then having to manage parents, a little bit of a different story. There's a different level of tenacity there. So,
It's my hat is off to them. And I tell you, it's again, it has to be a calling.
yeah,
And Southwest was that way a little bit. We said it's not just a career, it's a cause. And it's not just a cause, but because Southwest isn't typically the highest paying corporation, and childcare certainly isn't. I mean, it's
no,
hard at $15-16 an hour entry level to keep tuition as low as we can because of the ratio requirements and the labor cost associated with it. So you really have to feel like it's like you're called as a person to serve children and to educate them. And if you don't have that, it's hard to be tenacious. And then I think the level of patience that comes, I think there's patience and tenacity probably walk a little hand in hand as well. Because if things kind of spool up and you've got an inspection or you have a facility issue or something that's going on and that really gets your blood pressure up, childcare is probably not for you. So that's going to happen.
yeah, no, I definitely get that. And when you start looking at childcare in 2018, you've held several different board member roles, I noticed across your bio. And in 2018, you became a board member of Lionheart. And I didn't see anything really associated with the childcare industry before that. A lot of strong corporate roles of ascension into significant leadership. But you then joined the board. And tell me a little bit about that, why you chose to get onto that board and what did it mean to you, and maybe some of your influences of joining the board first.
But Tony, our founder Stan Dobbs is was a pastor, went to seminary, but really a businessman. I think he'd been in the corporate world before he felt called to the ministry. His family was business executives. One of the more strategic entrepreneurial business minds that I've ever met. And mentioned 2018, 2017. Lionheart was just getting started, maybe one or two, three academies, but the vision was to literally, have thousands of them.
Yeah.
And so he knew that he was needing people that could help with what we call the 3 S's, spiritually effective being the number one, but then scalability and sustainability. And so myself and others, we joined the board to really help build a scalable and sustainable, spiritually effective, we call it business tree, part business, part ministry,
Sure.
business tree. And now we're today 27 locations, 5 camps, and 22 academies across 5 states. But we still are not as scalable as we need to be to get to 100 or to 1,000. So that was, kind of the impetus behind me joining the board. It was something I enjoyed. I love the ministry aspect of it. And that's kind of our why. That's why we all do this. But the business challenge of building a sustainable, meaning the nonprofit, we're a faith-based nonprofit. Our business is generating about 95% approximately of our annual need.
Wow.
So that's great. I don't have to go out and raise 100% every year. We just have to raise 5% every year, which for a non-fundraiser, that's very daunting. I'm not, people are, oh, that's so great, Jeff. You guys are providing 95% of your support. And I'm like, yes, but the 5% is really hard to go get.
Yeah.
But so that's the real thing, is that the vision behind creating a nationwide childcare, excellent early education business hosted in local churches to provide community and connectivity into the church faith-based nonprofit was very, very compelling, and love it. And that's, kind of stayed connected, and eventually left the board. And then I knew they were looking for a CEO, and felt kind of that tug, like maybe now is the time. I turned 60, and now's the time if I'm going to step out into kind of full-time faith-based nonprofit work. And they hadn't filled it, and so I started about 15 months ago.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And you're starting to mention, I usually don't get to it till the end, but just tell us a little bit how Lionheart is a little different than the average bear out there. What is it that, your sort of strategy, what is a little bit more, obviously it's faith-based, which is wonderful, but how are you looking at, your space and how you find locations and what you sort of do and why you do it?
Well, yeah, I think it's unique.
Yeah.
We're not proprietary at all, though. We would love to help other Christian faith-based childcares be effective. We kind of tapped the brakes once we had gotten to 5 states. Each state has different regulations, and so, I'm sure your listeners know. So we're focused on Texas, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, and Colorado right now. And the uniqueness is that we wouldn't just go open a child care facility. It's got to be inside a church or in proximity to a church with a church sponsor.
Okay.
So we use their facilities. Most of the time it's recently renovated or brand new, that kind of is really built for licensed full-time childcare.
Okay.
And it's an amazing thing, Tony. It brings people, it meets a need in the community for childcare, right? So you got to it's housed in the church, and so if people don't have a church home or have a community of support around them, the church partners with us, and so we can provide the support for the entire family. And it creates, energy in a building that a lot of times isn't being used Monday through Friday very effectively. Traffic in, a lot of our centers that may have 150, 160 children, will have 75 adults coming into the church twice a day for drop off and pickup. So the coffee shops in the church lobbies and the chance to meet new people and all that is pretty special. But that's probably the biggest unique thing about Lionheart, is that it partners. We don't, we're asset light. We don't own any assets, any facilities. We just partner with local churches to provide basically a ministry in their building to reach the community.
Sure. And what would you say was your biggest surprise when you took on this role from your previous roles? What would you say is your biggest surprise in the work you're doing today, different than what you've done in the past with most of your corporate roles that are not really, and I don't believe have you had other nonprofit roles like this before?
No.
Yeah. So going from being a corporate profit guy to a nonprofit leader has to be a little bit of a span of a chasm, I'd say.
Yeah. No doubt. The size, I think the size, we're 700. Yeah, we're 700 employees, but kind of only about 40 at our national office. And so, the team that you have to help you on things is way more limited than when you're 60,000 employees at Southwest Airlines, right? And but it's just hard, Tony. What we're doing is we don't have any customers, any employees, and most of the time no facilities. And so we've launched, 27 small businesses in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And it's hard. Each one of them is an individual business, right? And then in conjunction with all 27 of those, we have 27 church ministry partners that we're trying to work and partner with. And all do it on nonprofit, donations and budgets.
Right.
And so it is very challenging. I don't know how, you know, somebody runs as one or two or three. I mean, it's just a lot to handle. But again, how many small businesses fail? 80% of all new. So that's the biggest thing, is it's not one organization. Every academy is a new organization. It's basically a new business.
Interesting. And when you see that, do you have a general recipe for what you believe makes them successful in general? Like, do you feel like, hey, if we get this, we're likely have a much stronger likelihood of success than we do from any other method?
Yeah. Well, number one, and I think the legendary CEO of Southwest Airlines, Herb Kelleher, said the business of business is people, people, people. Right.
Yeah.
And I had a young woman tell me the other day, a quote I hadn't heard before, that business moves at the speed of relationships, which I really like.
Yeah.
And so I would tell you that it's all about relationships. And so we are sharing space with the church. And so if you've ever had a guest live in your home for a month, it creates conflict, and just natural conflict. So the relationship is paramount. That we are our theme, if you will, is one heart, one vision, because we all have a heart to serve children, and we all have the same vision with our church partners. It's that may be worded a little differently, but we all want to extend the kingdom. We want to reach people, plant seeds of faith, etc. And so we are one purpose, one mind. So it's the relationship there is paramount. There's a lot of other things. It needs to have the size capacity. If the ratios aren't exactly right, the room sizes don't work for 2 teachers versus 1. If there's it's in a location that's kind of on the border of 4 or 5 school districts versus kind of 1 or 2. There's a lot of things that would be criteria for a more successful on the business side.
Right.
But that doesn't happen without the relationship on our ministry side.
Well, and I think it's interesting that you put it that way, because when we listen to the people who are listening to like this podcast and who are ascending leaders, I think there's oftentimes this dichotomy of, you're small and you sort of have to fight for to make that small business happen. Like you said, most small business go out of business. And not only do you have to have things like we've revisited before, like tenacity, and you have to have all these different elements to make sure you're successful, but you do have to fight to make these businesses survive. But on the other hand, too, you have to work in partnership oftentimes. So whether it's working with, the pastors or the congregation or anybody with that at church, similar would be to those who may not be in a faith base, but they have to work with the school districts. They have to work with their licensors. They have to work with, caseworkers, for social service programs. And, what I sort of extrapolate from what you're saying is that's really where some of the delicacy of the business is really that ability to how to work in, harmonious relationships while still trying to aggressively grow the business. Would that be a fair statement?
Very fair. Yeah, very fair. I think it's, again, it's, we're maybe a little unique in that we're not trying to grow the childcare business,
right?
Absent from the ministry. So, and the ministry is dependent upon the relationships. And so for us, that's the primary objective. That's the primary goal, is to not just build relationships, have good relationships and strengthen those.
Yeah.
Because if that's working, then I'm telling you, the business side works great. When Pastor Paul at one of our academies is in the lobby and every kid hugs him and loves him, and on Easter Sunday, 200 family members from our academy show up at the Easter service, it's working, right? But it's
Yeah.
because of the relationship we have with the church staff there. And it's a differentiator, certainly, not for everybody, but we welcome everybody. Obviously we'd love to have anybody come in, but it's not our goals aren't bottom line or profit. They're not revenue growth. It's all creating the finances all are a means to an end to create sustainability so we can grow with more church partners.
Sure, absolutely. What do you like most about what you do today?
Well, we talked about filters early on, and it might not surprise you to know that my primary job satisfier is job challenge. And I think I found it. And which is good. But so it's it's really, I think, being able to draw on what I've learned, what mistakes I've made over a long career. It had to have, you've probably done this too, Tony. There's been some jobs where you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had another high school job I grew up in the panhandle of Texas, where
Sure.
Amarillo is.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been there?
I have not been there, but I'm definitely aware.
Okay. It's flat. It's pretty flat, but what wonderful place. And I worked in a fertilizer plant.
Hmm.
Yeah, and where fertilizer comes from, right? It's like,
oh yeah.
So it was a building that would not have lasted 1 minute with an OSHA inspector. No running water, no ventilation. A bunch of high school boys in there with running front end loaders and tractors, dumping manure into this auger that was being heated by open flame natural gas.
Sure, wonderful odors pontificating the building.
Well, here's the tenacity piece of it. So you dump it into this bin, and it would feed it into this open pipe and be heated, and it would kind of grind it up, and then it would take it in a conveyor belt, and it'd dump it down into this warehouse, this big barn looking thing, right? And it just go like this. And then another front end loader would come and scoop it up and fill it into this machine, the only machine that was like automated in the whole thing. And it would measure 50 pounds of manure and blow it down into a bag. Right. I was the bag holder.
Oh, geez.
I'd hold the bag. And then manure would go down in there, come up, and oh man, then I'd put it on a conveyor belt. We'd load the trucks or the train or whatever was there. And you would be just covered like you've been in a coal mine for weeks at the end of a shift. But it paid more than the $3 minimum wage was back at the time. And I just thought so many times, what did that prepare me for the really tough jobs? So this is a lot of fun. I work with a great team, very talented. I mean, it's I could former C-level folks from large hotel chains and ExxonMobil and great companies. We've got a strong group of ops leaders. I was just looking the other day. I think they average about 15 years of early childhood development education experience, and so very thankful for the team. It was awesome to walk into a established, strong team a year ago. So that's probably, the people is always the best part, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, and I hear something in you that is very obvious from right at the beginning of our conversation. There's very little hubris, a lot of being humble. And I think it speaks to your servant leadership. We only actually have a few minutes left here. We went by that quick already. But there's a couple questions I do want to get in.
Okay.
Still, when you look back on your career, what would you say your biggest faux pas were in your career where you're like, you know what, I really sort of blew this, but I learned from it. Do you have one or two that you could share?
Yeah, well, several. I have one or two.
Like, how
Jeez, I
long do
mean,
we have?
yeah. God. I mean, it's like it's a question that gets asked because people want to learn, and it's like you don't learn from a mistake, you learn from reflecting on the mistake.
Right.
And so I've reflected on mistakes a lot, and I think I'll give you one good example. Southwest Airlines had somewhat, I think maybe it was after 08, 09 recession, we hadn't hired in a while, hadn't been growing, so we hadn't been hiring. And the position of flight attendant was very popular. It's a great company to begin with, but then you get to travel and the work schedules are good, pays good. And so we were about to open up applicants to accept applications for flight attendant for the first time in many years. And so we're advertising it, we're pre-marketing it. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, everybody that's applied, we're about to open up, we're about to open up, we're about to open up. It was February the 14th, and I was with the leaders in Chicago on location at an event, and we opened it up, and it didn't crash the Southwest website, but the career page behind it, which was a separate system, crashed.
Oh,
Right. So, and the harder it was to get in, the more open browsers there were, people trying to get in. And I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands of people tried to apply at once, but it crashed. And well, I'm trying to do this remotely, but the call comes. We are getting killed on social media. But the people team is telling me we've got thousands of resumes already. We don't need any more. We're not going to be able to process all these in the next 3 years, right? We don't need any more. And it was the second decision. What you make a mistake, everybody's going to do that, but it's usually the second decision that really gets you. And we made the decision out of a kind of a peace offering or try to make up a few more people in to open it back up, even though we didn't need all the applications at 8 o'clock the next morning, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. So at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, 6 a.m. on the West Coast, we opened it up and it crashed again. And
I'm sorry to laugh, but yeah.
no, it was painful. And I'll tell you that is a common characteristic, I think, of the mistakes I've made. Is if you're not making mistakes, you're not making anything. You probably got a over analysis, and so you're going to make them, but it's just really focus on the next decision you make. Make sure you make, once you make a mistake, the next decision needs to be right. And that was an example when the second decision was not right, and it actually made the situation worse, not better.
Right. Well, and as we reflect, as we finish up here a little bit, and you've reflected on the conversation and the career that you've had, and you look at people in the audience, especially those who are mainly owners and operators of maybe organizations in the childcare space that are growing, that are striving, they're looking to get better, whether it be for profit reasons, whether it be for their values and their ethical reasons, for whatever reasons that they're in the business. What are some things that you would want to leave with them and say, through your career, these are things that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's could write a book. I might have to write a book one day.
We talked about that before. Maybe I think that's the second time you mentioned it. So I'm looking for a book now at some point.
But the reason is that, there's, you learn, you make these mistakes, you learn from them, and you have really good people teach you things along the way. And it seems kind of a shame to waste it and not to share that with others,
Yeah.
And I think one of them is just that came to mind as you were asking the question, is just the power of networking. Be intentional about meeting with people. I kind of like 15 years older or 50 years younger for that kind of that mentoring, reverse mentoring. benefit that you get for not to get anything out of it other than if you can help somebody maybe with a job transition, or you just meet for coffee and get to know them.
Yeah.
That has been something that served me well. And most people, I shouldn't say most, but I just don't know many people that do it on a regular basis. I try to keep kind of my morning before 8:30, 9 o'clock free, just to say yes to people that want to meet, want to talk, want career advice or whatever it is, salespeople. And part of that leads to one of the other, recommendations that I'd have for your listeners. And that is that, more people will follow availability than vision, right? You can cast some big vision, but if you'll just be present and available to people, and that has proven accurate to me time after time, where I've rehired somebody that worked for me 15, 20 years ago. It wasn't because I had some stellar vision back then and I was leading with vision. I was available to them. I knew them. I knew their family. I knew their kids. And I made myself available to them after we were no longer boss subordinate or whatever relationship. And so I think network intentionally and be available to people, be present.
That's awesome. I don't think we've heard that one before, and I love that because it is a philosophy that I've tried to share myself personally. As a matter of fact, we just brought a team member back on who was with us before, and things didn't work out for a while for different reasons, and there's personal reasons. And she left to do her own journey, and then we always stayed in touch. And how can we help each other? And now she's like, "When can I come back?" And I was like, the timing's right, so let's bring you back. And so I love that idea that, well, Jeff, we've already exceeded our time and it happened very quick here. So I could have easily gone on and asked you a lot of questions. So I am hoping you put that book together one day. That's for sure.
Well, I enjoyed it, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh no, it's been great. I love the idea of what Lionheart is doing and how they are sort of reinventing a way to build up congregations in churches throughout the nation in a very unique way that is focused on the children. That's a unique approach, and I think it's a great and has a lot of sensibility in it alone from obviously where things are coming from. So I have to wish you and your team the very best. And I want to tell you, Jeff, that this has been a great conversation. If there's anything we could do to help you out, and anybody who would be interested, who might be out there, who might have I guess you would say, is a facility or a church, would they be, if they reached out to your team, would it make sense just to find a part of it?
Absolutely. We would. We love to help people. Again, we'll do feasibility work if you have a church and think you might want to host a Lionheart Academy or a Skylark. We have a sister organization, Skylark Summer Camps. Week 10-week camp in the summer. Reach out, to our lionheartkid.org website, and if you're in Texas, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, or Colorado, if you're not, we'll still help you, but we'll just be referring you to another organization after we do a feasibility.
There you go. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. So this is Tony D'Agostino. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360, and this is our podcast, ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. We're very glad that you had a chance to join us today, and we look forward to having you join us again. Thank you to Jeff Lamb with Lionheart, and we'll talk to you all very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Tony D'Agostino again with Inspire Care 360. I wanted just to talk to you a little bit about HR support. We support HR with an entire platform as well as an HR expert on demand for you to call day or night whenever you have a question. That's really not true. They're probably asleep at night. But throughout the business day, you have access to HR experts to ask about any kind of questions that are about legal, Department of Labor questions to the state as well as federal. Not only will they answer your questions according to what you are asking, they will send you follow-up documentation that is state-based DOL approved. So if you want to learn more of how you can take part of that, whether you are part of the family of Inspire Care 360 or would like to become, click the link below.
You have been listening to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. Thank you very much for listening. We are greatly appreciative of your time. We will continue to produce these programs on an ongoing basis, and please hit the download button and subscribe to our podcast so you do not miss an episode. Thank you very much and hope you have a wonderful day.